Hey everyone, I'm Jay, and in today's lab we're going to be creating functions in Python for our first time. Right? I am using VS Code, and I do have a specific reason for that, which we'll see in a moment. But let's get talking about what are functions, and why do we need them. In our previous couple of labs, we've been creating loops, and every time you do a loop, you do the same piece of code over and over again, right? Great. Awesome. What if you want to execute the same piece of code over and over again in more than one place, right? Functions are perfect for that because you create a function. It's a little self-contained module of code. And then when you call that function from within your program, you'll execute that piece of code one time. And every time you call it from anywhere within your program, let's say you want to call it in 3 different places, you don't have to write it 3 different times now. You write it once. Your program can call it from 3 different places, and it will execute exactly the same every time. Right? That's the beauty of functions. Right? If you ever have to modify it, you modify the function one time, and it will be modified for your entire program. If you created the same piece of code 2, 3, 4 times and you had to make a modification, not only do you have to change it in all of those places, you have to know that all of those places exist with that same code. And if you forget that one of them is off over here on some line of code, if you forget to update it, now your program really doesn't work. So functions are very useful to prevent human error and to allow us to do the same thing over and over again, because computers are really good at doing the same thing over and over again, right? We make a function. If we were making a simple calculator program, we made a function to do addition, then every time the user does addition, call that function. Hey, we're going to do some addition. We're going to do very simple functions our first time around. We're not going to give any arguments. We're not going to have any parameters, none of that kind of stuff. We're just going to call a function. Function is going to execute and do one thing, and we're going to see the output of that. So I've started let's take a look at the code. I've started my program, same as always. I've got my Python shebang that specifically say I'm using Python 3. I've got my comment that says who the author is and what this program does. Kind of, it just says functions here, but that's okay. Then I have the main program, and I said that my main program itself is going to be a function. And at the bottom, we'll talk about why that is. Okay. So now that I have functions at all, I've decided that the main part of my program is also going to be a function. So this is the main part of the function. We'll skip what it does for a moment, and we'll go down. I have 3 more functions: function 1, function 2, and function 3. Each of them all does the exact same thing, except the text is different. So function 1 just prints it that we are inside function 1. So when we call function 1, and you can see the output down here already, as soon as we call it, it's going to print, I'm inside function 1. And then when it finishes, it goes back to wherever it was called from and continues the program, wherever that is. Right? Same thing for function 2. When it gets called, it's going to print, I'm inside function 2. And then when the function finishes, let's go back to wherever it was called from and continue running the program. Okay. So now at the end of this, because I have my main program area inside my main function, I've added something, and this is fairly unique to Python. I've said if name, and this is a little funny, it's 2 underscores, the word name, 2 underscores. If name is equal to main, also 2 underscores, the word main, 2 underscores, this time in quotation marks. If name equals main, then I'm going to execute the main function. Else, I have a comment here, file was imported, do nothing, and then the pass command for Python says I have an else, but I'm not going to do anything with it. And that's the end of my program. And so I wanted to show you what that means when Python runs a file if it runs that file directly, and in our case, we open up the file, we're running this file, runs that file directly, it names that file main. And if that file then imports other files, let's say I imported file 2, for example, file 2, because it was imported, it will be called whatever its file name is called. So if it was called file 2, it will be called file 2, and that would be its name. Where's that name exist? We've not seen it before. It's been here the whole time. Now that I'm running in VS Code and I have my debugger open, I have a place where I can see all my variables. So I don't have any local variables. I've not made any for this program. But global variables, Python itself has a few special ones that are always made. Right? It says where the document is, the file, stuff like that. But we're concerned with this name. The name of this running program is main. And that's because this is the one that was directly opened and run. If I had imported any of the others, we'll do that later, but if I had, they would be named something other than main. And the only way they could be named main is if I actually named the file main. I've never done so to test it, but I suspect that it would cause problems. Okay, so I've said down here, if the name is main, we know that this was executed directly, and we're going to run our main program. If the name is not main, we know the file was imported, and we're not going to run our main program, but let's say our file is part of a larger program. If it gets imported, we can assume that the developer who imported it wants to use our functions. So we don't want to execute the main part, but we do want to make the functions available. So if we do nothing, the functions will be available, and we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to put, and I'm going to start putting this at the bottom of most of my files from now on, now that we've learned how to do this. I may cut it short and not do the second part. I might just do the first part, but I'm going to start putting this in all of our programs now. Okay, so now that we've seen that, let's have a look at what our main function actually does. It's going to print, I'm inside main. It's going to do that first. Let's put a little space in here so we can read this better. Okay, that's not really better, right? Okay, so it's going to print, I'm inside main. It's going to call function 1. Function 1 is going to execute. When function 1 finishes executing, the program is going to come back to the main function. It's going to print inside main. Then it's going to call function 2. Function 2 is going to do its thing, which is print inside function 2. Then when it finishes, program control is going to come back here and continue executing, and we're going to print inside main. Then we're going to call function 3. Function 3 does its thing. Program control comes back here and continues on, and we print inside main again. So we can see the output inside main, inside function 1, inside main, inside function 2, inside main, inside function 3, and finally inside main. And then I have my breakpoint there, which is so that I can run the debugger and pause the debugger at the end. Okay. So that's all we're doing in this lab. That's the entirety of it. And now we have created some functions. In future labs, we'll actually give some variables to those functions when we call them, and we'll actually do some stuff with it. But for now, just learning how to write functions. The way we write them, we say define, name the function, name it whatever you like. Strictly speaking, I don't actually have to name my main function main, but if you name it something else, then future you might get a little bit confused, or future somebody else who is updating your code might get a little bit confused. So by standard, we call the main part of the program main. And then you have these parentheses here. So we've called some functions before. We've called print, right? and we just have the name of it. We have the parentheses, and in print's case, we actually pass some arguments, some parameters, okay? And the difference between an argument and a parameter is basically the point of view, whether you're the caller of the function or you're the function itself. That's primarily what the difference is. You may hear me say those words interchangeably, and that's because, yeah, I'm not that strict about it. So with the print function, we pass it an argument inside main, and then the print function exists somewhere else. It's built into Python. It does its thing, and then it passes control back to us, back to our main function, and we carry on. And that's how functions work. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.